Good morning again from New York City, coming up to Christmas. Nice day out, a little bit of snow yesterday, nothing happening today. Nice grey, somber day. Alright, so I'm going to do another couple of book reviews. I only review books that I have, and I have an extensive collection. As I mentioned before, with regard to the Gran Torino, when Clint Eastwood said to the young guy said he wants to be a craftsman. Clint Eastwood has a massive tool shed. And the little boy says to Clint Eastwood is mentoring him, he said, how will I ever get so many tools? He said, you will not. These are tools amassed by me over a lifetime. And the same is true for books. So, I'm going to talk about some books that I don't like. I'm not saying they're good or bad, I'm just saying I don't like them. I'll also introduce a couple of books that I really like for several reasons. Well, we'll come to those in a minute. First of all, the ones that I do not like. Now, I'm going to start off with Eugene Merzbacher, Quantum Mechanics. I simply don't like the way it's written. I don't like the style of English. The content is quite good. A great test for a good book in quantum mechanics is this, that the guy does not just quote the Pauli spin matrices, he actually arrives at them by some form of derivation. There are many approaches. One approach is to use raising and lower operators. I don't like that approach, but it's doable. So he has done that in here. But it's the way he approaches difficult points. He'll say something like, it is not difficult to show that the following is true. Well, it might be difficult. It might not be for him, but a student might find it difficult, right? Or it is obvious that this is the case. Statements like that are very redundant and frustrating in any textbook, and this is full of them. And that's why I don't like it. A more expensive book is Schiff, but I certainly wouldn't pay the money at the graduate level for Schiff. So people tend to let students buy this one because it costs less. When I was at grad school, this was recommended as well with Schiff, but everybody bought this because it was about half the price of Schiff. Yeah, so we had to struggle through with it. There was nothing else available. Now, a truly awful book on mathematical methods is Matthews and Walker. Where is it? Mathematical Methods in Physics by Matthews and Walker. Mathematical Methods in Physics by Matthews and Walker. Eugene Merzbacher's book, I'll let you see the inside page. John Wiley and Sons. Eugene Merzbacher. It's an old book. But anyway, Matthews and Walker simply lacks in terms of detailed explanation, right? Now it has an awful lot of topics covered, and that's actually the problem with the book. The book is only 500 pages including index long, and it tries to do everything. Now you can't do everything. Now a lot of people like to use contour integrals. Feynman didn't like them. This is full of contour integrals. Feynman had ways around contour integrals such as differentiating under the integral sign. Now this book is supposedly based on Feynman's Mathematical Methods lecture notes, I think from Cornell, but I'm not sure. But like I said before, I do not believe there's much of Feynman in here, right? If you want to learn supersymmetry, right, and you want to learn it, and maybe superspace and supergravity, stay away from this book. You start looking for an introduction to supersymmetry on the first page, and you keep on going and going and going, and it simply is not in there. What a supersymmetry is kind of elementary. It's a variation of the Lagrangian. Such that certain things happen. We have to add other fields, maybe a vector field, and the variation induces certain transformations on the fields such that You make a boson out of a fermion and a fermion out of a boson. And it gets quite complicated, actually. So I'm not going to go into that, but that is not addressed in this, right? This uses the superspace that Salam and Strathty invented. Superspace with space-time coordinates and then anti-commuting Grassmann coordinates, and it just launches straight into them. You know, it's been around a long time. Many, many people have struggled to learn stuff out of it. I actually worked things out of it myself, and I know Jim Gates. Sorry, Jim. He's a friend of mine. I wouldn't say we're close friends, but we're working friends. But you know, it doesn't get great compliments from me, that book. I have it as a reference. Some people are going to kill me for this one, right? The large-scale structure of space-time. This is basically an abstract book on mathematics with very little to do with the large-scale structure of space-time. If you want to learn about black holes, this is not the way to do it. If you want to learn about cosmology, no, go to Weinberg instead. This is not it. There's not a single experimental result in here, and that's another weakness. Oh yeah. A great weakness of this book is there is not a single cross-section, right? There is no Lagrangian. There is no path integral. There is no decay rate figured out. Nothing that you could check supersymmetry or supergravity with, right? Therefore, it is not physics in my view. You have to be able to check things experimentally or observationally if it's to be called physics. So I don't know what you can call this. Maybe mathematical exercises. Now, I think a truly awful book is this one. You have Gravitation. Oh yeah, let's have a look inside the cover of Hawking. And it's Hawking and John Ellis. John Ellis from South Africa, published by Cambridge University Press. It's a very old book. Get a year for it. 1973, first published. Stephen Hawking and John Ellis. People buy it just because Hawking is in it, right? And Ellis too, I guess. But John Archibald Wheeler was Feynman's dissertation supervisor. And he was a phenomenal contributor to what we call physics, general relativity and cosmology and other things. He was around a long time. I think he lived to be about 100, and he was productive for most of his life. You know, can you imagine, he was only a couple of years older than Feynman, down there in Princeton when he was a supervisor. Now, this is a truly awful book because what you've got here are three people, Charles Misner, Kip Thorne, and John Archibald Wheeler, writing three different books, shuffling the cards and putting it all in here. Now, there are some good things in the book. Geodesics are derived in a very quite a nice way. What's good in the book are things that are covered in little brackets. But the main body of the book is tiresome, to say the least. I'm looking for something there's also some interesting things in the book, and that is little bits of history. See, these boxes throughout the book have great information in them. But if you're trying to learn general relativity, forget it. It's just nice to pick it up as a coffee table book and read what's in the box. Here's some details on George Bernard Ryman, and there's a lot of that throughout the book. Now, it also introduced a new language of general relativity, which grossly overcomplicated the topic, differential forms and the way of looking at tensors. You know, simple basic tensor calculus is more than enough for general relativity. So that one gets it thumbs down to me. People like to have it on their shelf because it's so thick. It looks impressive. You can throw it at your neighbour and impress them. Having said that, now for the bad books, I'll look at a couple of good books because that was a very short presentation. Two awesome books are by Enrico Fermi, just because he's the master. But what makes them fantastic is the following. Thermodynamics and statistics, statistical mechanics he means. It's the man himself, handwritten. Now wait a minute, Fermi-Dirac statistics is a body of knowledge. And here you have the guy himself talking about Fermi-Dirac statistics, somewhere towards the back of the book. And it's himself. right? That's what makes it awesome, and he is truly a master. And the way Fermi does everything is this. He'll address the physics in as simple as possible mathematical approach, and then include experimental calculations, data. Wherever you have Fermi working, he will do some calculation and put in numbers right there, okay? Quantum states in an atom, whatever this is, I don't know, but he puts in figures everywhere. You get experimental results, lots of cross sections calculated, the density of states there. Density of states is a very difficult topic, by the way, and I mean to do a presentation on it. It's not covered properly anywhere. Anyway, that's the one on statistical thermodynamics and statistical mechanics by Enrico Fermi. Awesome little book, and it's thin and terribly inexpensive. He does the same thing again for quantum mechanics. Lots of calculations, lots of numbers put in at every level where there's a calculation. Here he calculates the fine structure constant and things like that, puts the numbers in. The Rydberg constant, decay rates, angular momentum. Now, Fermi never learned quantum mechanics out of a book, and this is the way the quantum mechanics comes across. Fermi lived through its development. So Fermi learned by osmosis. As people came out with new ideas, he would pick up on them, and then he assimilates this, because this is based on a course taught at the University of Chicago, I think around in the 50s sometimes. I'm not sure, but I think Fermi died in 1953, I can't remember. This is published in 1961, first published, but that doesn't mean Fermi was still alive when he published it. And it has an introduction by, I think it's Segre, Emilio Segre, who was a colleague of Fermi and a contemporary. Great man in his own right too. It's a very different approach now to quantum mechanics, and he covers lots of subtopics in a very nice way. I'm really fond of it. Awesome book. Now, because I said something bad about Jim's book on superspace, Gates, Grizzaro, Rocek, and Siegel, I don't know who's responsible for complicating it up, whether it's Jim or the other guys, I don't know. But recently Jim came out with a kind of a history book. Well, it's not him, actually, it's written with Kathy Pelletier. Now, when I read through this book, I kind of know Jim's writing style, so it's mostly this person's here's writing style. So whatever Jim inputs into this book seems to be the technical knowledge. Proving Einstein right is about trying to find evidence for general relativity, in particular Eddington's search for the bending of starlight around the sun and a few things like that. So it's a history book, but it's a nice thing to have on your shelf. He's just come out with it, so I have to recommend it. I haven't finished reading it yet though. If you're a history of physics buff yourself, if you're interested in the history of physics, then you have to get Whittaker's A History of the Theory of Ether and Electricity. It's a very old book. On the front you have pictures of Eddington. I think that's Descartes, and I think that's Poincaré. So it's from 1910, so you can imagine what it's like. Even when this was written, relativity hadn't even come to the fore. But it's actually very detailed. Here's some equations from electromagnetism. You know, what was known at the time is put in here. Lots of reference to electromagnetism and so on and so forth, wave equations. But it's a great history book. And if you want to learn history properly, this is the way to go. Things have changed since it was written, but it doesn't mean you can throw it out, because what's in here is still accurate, right? It's still true, just that it doesn't have too much relativity in it, because relativity didn't really come to the fore when it was written. Okay, so now the next time if I review books, I'll review a bunch of Feynman books. I have them over there on the shelf, but that's enough for today. I don't want to make a mishmash out of this. For this presentation, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for listening. I'm also going to do, I think that phone move? Yeah, the camera moved a little bit, but I think you can adjust. Look, this is the way it should be. All right then. Sorry about that. So other things that are coming up, I'm going to go back and do actually some physics presentations. All right? That's all coming up. I have to do more on the Dirac equation, I have to do density of states, and density of states is a big topic. It's covered very poorly in all the texts that people write on solid state physics. Like standard text in solid state physics is Ashcroft and Merriman, and one of the most important ideas is the density of states. He calls it the density of levels and throws everybody off. And it's the way it's done is too abstract. All right, then that's coming up more later.